Ellen and Yvette. Whoa.
Hello.
Guess I've seen both of you relatively recently.
That's true.
In person, I mean.
Yeah, in person. I guess that's a new thing we have to add on to everything, right? We're meeting up before.
Just so you are aware, Mark, we are live as it was giving some people trouble getting in as a panelist. So I just wanted to let you know that.
Oh, do I have to be careful what I say?
Exactly.
Probably mute, Mark. But all of us.
All right, I'll behave. I'm muting myself.
Let's see.
I actually see Elias and Veronica there on the attendees. Is there a way to bring them over as panelists?
Yes, we're doing that now.
Okay.
Cool. Thank you.
Yes, sorry, we were having trouble getting everyone in. So I just want to let you know that we are live. That's how everyone was able to join, and now we're promoting the correct people to panelists. Does anyone have Monza's cell or contact information? I know he responded that he would be attending, but I don't see him in the panelist group.
I'll send him a text right now.
Thank you. We do have a quorum with 4 members, so.
Monza is trying to log in, but is having a hard time locating his Zoom password.
Is he referencing his own Zoom password so he can actually log in as himself, or?
Good question. Let me clarify.
Okay. Because I don't believe he needed a password for this Zoom. Everyone else was able to get in.
I think he's among the attendees now.
You made it.
Hello, everyone.
Hi, it's good to see you, Monza. It's good to see you,
What's up, Anza?
Elias. It's good to see you.
I see all y'all too.
Well, then I think we can call the meeting to order. Is that right?
Yes.
Our host is on, right? I think there are a couple of people maybe you don't know, like our host and Veronica. So maybe we should just introduce ourselves really quickly. Yvette, I'm just going to call people from my screen because from where you are. So Yvette, could you start?
I'm Yvette Minor, and I'm the vice chair. And I am currently representing Roseland District for Eddie Alvarez.
Great. I'm Ellen Bailey, and I'm the chair. And I was, let's see, who brought me in? I've forgotten. It's been so long, right? Actually, it was Chris Rogers. No, not Chris Rogers. Oh, this is terrible. It'll come to me. Jack. It was Jack who brought me here. Sorry about that. And I'm glad to see everyone. Mark, you're next in the row.
Hello, Mark Stapp, and I'm representing Chris Rogers.
And Elias?
Yes, hey everybody. My name is Elias, appointed by Natalie Rogers for District 7.
Thank you. I'm sorry I mispronounced your name. I'll try to do better.
It's all good.
And Manza?
Hello, everyone. Manza Atkinson. I was appointed by Victoria Fleming, I think almost 2 years ago now. District 4. Thank you.
Great. And Veronica?
Yes, it's nice to meet everybody. My name's Veronica, and I've been on the budget team for many years, and so I've been to several of these meetings in the past, but today I am in the place of where Shelley Riley used to be. She's no longer with the city, so she used to facilitate these meetings a little more, so I am stepping into her role for this meeting. So nice to see everybody, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you for stepping in.
Mm-hmm.
And Alan?
I'm Alan Alton. I'm the acting chief financial officer, so providing staff support.
Great. And who's our host?
Hi, Trisha Mason. I am with the finance department as an admin technician.
Thanks, Trisha. And then our recording secretary.
Hello, my name is Victoria Luna. I am the recording secretary and administrative secretary for the finance department for the city.
Great. Thanks, everybody. I appreciate you introducing yourselves. We don't meet that often. And then when you names change, we're in the dark a bit. So it's nice and thank you for all the support from the staff that we get, and of course, all of our members. I just want you to know that we heard as of November 1st, Danica Rodemel has resigned from our committee. And I'm not sure why, but she's resigned. And so we have 2 people missing, but we do have a quorum, which is great. And we will talk to the council members who need to and see if we can get some new members on our committee. And I think probably the first thing we need to do is to have a roll call.
Alrighty, Chair Bailey,
Here.
Vice Chair Minor,
Here.
Member Hennett,
Here.
Member Atkinson,
Present.
Member Stapp.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we have some housekeeping things I need to remind you of. We need you to keep your audio on mute unless you're asked to speak or you want to speak. And then the staff will remain muted until needing to speak. And as members of the public join the meeting, you will be participating as an attendee. Your microphone and camera will be muted. Only today's panelists, which are the committee members and the staff that are working with us, will be viewed during the meeting. If you're calling in from a telephone and you choose to speak during the public comments portion of today's agenda, for privacy concerns, the host will be renaming your viewable phone number to resident and the last 4 digits of your phone number. And then I'd like to ask the recording secretary to please explain how public comments will be heard at the meeting.
At each agenda item, the item is presented. The chair will ask for committee members' comments and then open it up for public comment. The host in Zoom will be lowering all hands until public comment is open for the agenda item. Once the chair has called for public comment, the chair will announce for the public to raise their hand if they wish to speak on the specific agenda item. If you are calling in to listen to the meeting audibly, you can dial 9 to raise your hand. The host will then call on the public who have raised their hands. Public comment will be limited to 3 minutes and a timer will appear on the screen for the committee members and public to see. Once all live public comments have been heard, the meeting host will read emails submitted. If you provide a live public comment on an agenda item, but also submitted email, your email comment will not be read during the meeting. Additionally, there is 1 public comment period on today's agenda to speak on non-agenda matters, which is item 2. This is the time when any person may address the committee on matters not listed on this agenda.
Okay, so this is public comment time right now.
Yes.
And any person, are there any public members? Are you aware of that? If anyone's on?
Not that it looks like.
Okay.
There are no hands raised.
No hands raised, okay. And so I guess then the next thing we do is we go to item number 2, public comment on non-agenda items. We are now taking public comments on item 2, non-agenda items. And this is the time when any person can address the committee. Is there anybody? I think we decided that was no already. I'm doubling up here, sorry. Okay, so now let's go back to the host about how this works, but do we need to do all that, read all that if there's no one there?
No email comments were received, so we don't need to, if no hands are raised, we don't need to explain everything and put the timer up.
Okay, great, thank you. This feels really cumbersome to me. You guys do it all the time, so I apologize for I'm stumbling along here. Okay, so now it's time to move on to item 3, which is the approval of the minutes. Are there any corrections to be made on the minutes? Does any of the committee members want to make any changes or corrections? I guess not. Then I need to ask for someone to make a motion and someone to second it to approve of the minutes from
So
the
moved. Motion to approve.
I second Mark's motion.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then now let's move on to item 4.1, the Measure O annual report. And Veronica is going to introduce the.
I do have a quick question. Do we need to all be in agreement? Do we have to call for yays and nays?
Oh, I didn't ask for the vote, did I? I apologize. Thank you, Yvette. I'm glad you're here, of course. And yes, could everyone please vote as to whether they approve or not of the motion to accept the approval of the minutes? If everyone who says yes.
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 Any noes? No. Thank you. Okay, now we can move on to the annual report. And Veronica will introduce each portion of the report.
All right, well, thank you everybody again for making it to the COC meeting today. We're going to be going over the fiscal year 2020-21 Measure O annual report, which will go over the revenue, earnings, and expenditures of the last fiscal year for Measure O. So there will be presented in 3 different sections for each department, and I am just going to hand it over to violence prevention and let them get started. So thank you.
Good evening, Measure OCOC. My name is Jen Kim, and I am the Violence Prevention and Partnerships Program Analyst. ASO Jason Harris is out of the office, and I will be reviewing the financial slides with you tonight. Next slide, please. So as you can see here, we started out with a beginning fund balance of $998,000 and approximately that. And then we are now ending at, as of 7/1/2020, $510,000. We did have to dip into the reserves. And I also wanted to note that the reserve for encumbrances and project commitments is related to our choice grant program being on a calendar year and not a fiscal year. So there's always a carryover there. And next slide, please. And as you can see here, a good percentage, close to half of our salaries and benefits. Our salaries make up a good portion of the budget, and then our benefits take up another 17%. And you can also see here that the Measure O ordinance requires 35% of Measure O funds to be allocated towards choice grants, and that's also a large portion. The administration is referring to the general fund citywide allocation. Next slide, please. And as you can see here, the last few years, 19, 20, and 2021, we have gone slightly over the revenues. And this is something that we're always looking at as we move forward through the budget year and the budget process of how we can be more aligned with the revenues. And now I will turn this over to Jeff Tibbetts.
Thank you, Geraldine. Next slide, please. So my name is Jeff Tibbetts. I'm the Interim Deputy Director for Recreation. If you've been on the Oversight Committee for a while, you may have had presentations from Kelly Magnuson. She retired this past July, so we want to thank her for all of her time with Recreation and these programs. So today I'm presenting on behalf of Recreation, the Neighborhood Services Division that provides our Measure O programs. Obviously, this year was a very unique year to report out on. So I'm new to the position and learning, and then also taking a year that was completely out of the norm, as we're all very familiar with. And before we kind of jumped into the presentation, really want to take a second to really dive into the School of Rec program. This was a distance learning support program that Neighborhood Services functions through Measure O, but really it was a full shift of the entire Recreation team to pull this off and provide this for the community. And it was, none of us have run a school before. None of us have dealt with a pandemic before. So as we were kind of trying to find our way through all of this, I think this graphic really kind of draws what we had to pull ourselves back to. And that was, no, we had never run a school program. Didn't know distance learning, didn't know pandemic, didn't know all these different protocols that we need to put in place. What we do know is that a successful program is built around your participant. So I really like in this graphic that our participant is the center of that chain, because ultimately when it got to it, when we tried to come up with, what if we tried this, what if we tried that, and couldn't figure out how to do it, it was get back to the root of it and start with the participant. What are we trying to achieve for, in this case, the youth that are going to be students in this distance learning program? There's a few things that right off the bat are kind of, we knew were going to be components of the program and expectations. Obviously, we're doing this distance learning program. It was about academic development. It was about providing a space where these kids would be able to come, they would be able to do their distance learning. Maybe these are children who don't have the resources at home to be able to get online, to be able to participate in these classes. Maybe there's students who don't have some of the support structure at home to help with homework assistance or those types of things. So we knew that that was a key component of why we chose to do School of Rec. Obviously, academic development was going to be a part of that. And so that kind of was there naturally. The other piece of it being recreation is we knew, hey, we're going to have these kids for a very long amount of time. Physical health is going to be a component as well, right? We're not going to be doing school the whole day. We're going to build in what we do as recreation so well. With physical health, we're going to get them out where they're going to be able to play games and do activities and do these things. What we didn't realize is how much further that would go than what we're generally familiar with. So when we were talking about physical health, we didn't realize the ability that we would have, the responsibility that we would have to build relationship with the county, to build those relationships, to lean on all the resources that we had. The kids in our program were able to have access to testing facilities through the program, that we were able to get information from the county and share that with families and really be a critical piece in that physical health of COVID and how our community reacted to it and how these families were aware of what was going on and the resources that were available to them. So quickly on, we started seeing, okay, there's more to this program than maybe when we originally scratched the surface of what are we doing. Another key component of it that was obvious from the beginning is it was going to, provide that food assistance. So we're going to have these kids all day. Obviously, we need to provide food. Similar to what they would be doing with the school. So through the Redwood Empire Food Bank and through Santa Rosa City Schools Kitchen, we were able to really operate as it would during the school day. Some kids would bring their lunch, some kids wouldn't. We, just as the same as the school day, the kids who want the lunch program would sign up for it in the morning. We'd get that count and we'd have the meals for the kids. So those components were kind of the key components that we knew going into it we had to do. There were obviously aspects of it that grew beyond what we thought we might be doing. But then there were a couple other components that as the program developed, as it grew, as these, participants, as these youth became ongoing participants, you get to know the families, you get to understand the services that we're providing. The mental health aspect and the social and emotional development, something that we are cognizant of in all the programming that we did, but something that we had never come close to what we were about to do with the School of Rec program. So when it came to the mental health components, something that was really key is that we were able to tap into the resources that the school would usually be providing these kids. One of the things that staff told me when I was talking to them about this program and this presentation is they really believe that what we achieved for the kids who participated in this program is that they had, I'm not going to go as far as saying normalcy, but they had a much closer level of normalcy than most kids experienced because of this program. And one great example of that is working with school counselors, working with the lead psychologist for the school district, and developing a program that the school came out. They provided training to our staff of how to deal with the youth that we were serving during a pandemic. And also I think we get so caught up in the pandemic and everything else that was going on in our society, the Black Lives Matter movement and these different things, social issues, images that kids were seeing on the news at home and bringing into our program. So we were able to do things with our staff and give our staff resources that went beyond some of the things that we had done in the past, which was fabulous. And also these kids were able to get the resources. Kids in our program, the schools realized how we were running the program, the safety protocols that we had in place, down to details of each cohort had their own restroom facility across our community centers. Our park monitor program being restructured to be at Finley Park Complex, sanitizing picnic tables, playground equipment, those types of things for kids to be able to use them safely. That the schools felt so comfortable with what we were doing that the school counselors would actually be able to meet with our participants in person, whereas everything else, they weren't able to go into homes and do those things. So other youth that weren't in the program were still just receiving those through Zoom. And we had those meetings as well, but when the counselor felt it would be beneficial and needed, they would come into our program and have in-person meetings. We were able to set up space for them. So again, just this growing sense of what we were doing and what we were offering. And then the social emotional development aspect of it. And what we realized really early on is for us to be successful, we had, I think any parent would tell you that the relationship between the parent and the school is critical in the child's success. We were now right in the middle of that relationship. So it was now the school, the parent, and recreation. And that was a key component that we really worked on and developed. And that allowed us to, really work with these kids and address issues at a level that as they're dealing with everything that was going on, that they could really have, again, that some sense of normalcy, or as much sense of normalcy as we could give them. They were able to have positive adult role models. This is a program that absolutely taxed us in every possible way, where our temporary employees, I won't go too far into it, but they have limitations of how many hours they can work in a calendar year and those types of things, and the level of service that we were providing. We were bringing numerous. We had to have shifts of staff coming in to cover the whole day to do this 5 days a week, 10 months out of the year. So numerous positive role models, serving as tutors, serving as friends, serving as someone for the kids to talk to, mentors. So that was great. The kids were part of a cohort that was forced on us, and that was something that was a challenge, but it was also, when you look at social and emotional development, something that was so key to the kids that were in this program, to be part of something in person with other kids, to have their cohort, to have their group. And again, I talked about all the issues that were going on, social issues and everything going on. Community circles, if you're familiar with, were a huge part of our program and really became critical as we built these relationships with the kids, that they could have, they're part of a cohort, they trust each other, they have these positive role models, they can have these conversations and discuss these things. That was, critical for their emotional well-being. And then we're still rec, we still brought in those rec components of it. So theme parties and themed events and those different things that, again, just put a smile on a kid's face, made them feel like they were part of something special, and really was critical in rounding out what School of Rec was. So I know, kind of went into the thick of it there with that program, but I really think after this last year, it was important to give a good understanding to the oversight committee of what this program really was. So next slide, please. But that will get a little bit more into what a typical, presentation on our programming might look like. So the details of School of Rec is, this was a Monday through Friday program, 10 months, from 7:30 in the morning drop off to 5 o'clock at 5 o'clock pickup. Anyone who's done programming knows that means the program ran till at least 5:15. So this was, again, a taxing program that went beyond anything that we had done, beyond what we normally do in the summer, which is we ramp up for 2 to 3 months of a summer program. Doing this for 10 months. It's hard to give the exact numbers of students because there were different phases, right? The rollout of the program, and then expanding it to Steel Lane Community Center to add additional cohort sizes changing based off of the COVID guidelines from the county, and then the schools eventually going back and having a hybrid model where our staff did an amazing job of completely revamping the program so that kids who a lot of parents chose not to have their children go back to school because they didn't feel it was needed. They could just continue. And so that cohort would run, or those children would run in cohorts consistent to what they had done, where other kids were going back to school, which we wanted to support as well. And we didn't want to lose them from the program because they were having that opportunity. So to revamp the whole schedule and everything so that those kids would go to school, the bus would drop them off at the community center, and then we would run half-day cohorts or cohorts that only ran certain days of the week, depending on what the school schedules were. And then I think a key point here too is, again, I briefly touched on the partnership with the local school district, and that's really how, our school districts, that's how we built the program. So we ended up partnering with Santa Rosa City Schools and Bellevue Union School District to serve these students. We had students from Lincoln Elementary, Helen Lehman Elementary, Biella, Steel Lane, and Meadowview. And we really worked with the schools to help identify who were the kids that should be in this program. So the schools, it was the principals, it was the counselors, the family engagement coordinators. So it wasn't one criteria of what are the highest need kids to get into this program. It was, from different perspectives, whether that, again, was resources at home. Is this a student that is already, maybe behind academically? family life situations that are going on for children where they really need a safe place to be during the day, access to technology, those types of things, or those tutoring services of someone who can read directions to the child or assist with tutoring the child on their homework assignments. And so that's kind of how the more the nuts and bolts of how the program got developed. Next slide, please. So this is our summer offering. It's always a little challenging to report summer on an annual fiscal year calendar because it splits right in the middle of our summer program. So the numbers down here are the 2021 summer, but I do want to draw to light, instead of trying to compile two different programs together, I do want to mention that we did operate in 2020, not the teen basketball camp, but the Better Together. If you haven't heard of Better Together, it's because it was kind of a rebrand of Recreation Sensation, which is our traditional summer camp. And we did this with our traditional recreation day camps as well, Camp Watam and Camp Uchi and Camp Doyle, is we didn't know exactly, right? We found out in March that we were getting shut down, and we were back up one of the first programs coming back in the summer of 2020. We knew we couldn't run what we have always branded as Recreation Sensation, but we knew we were going to run something. So a little rebranding to call it Better Together, and to be able to give new expectations, not knowing how that program was going to serve or how it was going to function. Still a really amazing program. I mean, if you compare it to Rec Sen of the past, numbers would certainly be down. And again, that's because of cohorts and safety measures and limiting of groups, but still serving 205 participants for 8,200 service hours per week. So really an amazing program, amazing opportunity to continue to serve over the summer months as well. And then again, in 2020, we did not have team basketball camp, but we were able to bring that back in 2021, serving 25 participants for 500 total service hours per week. One of the things that staff really reported and that we realized in that 2020 summer that led to what we did with School of Rec, what we did in 2021 summer, is there was definitely an increase in behavioral issues. You had a program like Team Basketball Camp in 2021 that was traditionally registered for team basketball. And this time was parents signing up their kids to get them in something and get them ready to go back to school the next year. And so really, even in something like a team basketball camp, how we had to really shift and staff had to shift, and the training of staff to get them prepared to deal with these different behavioral issues, to deal with getting used to wearing a mask, getting used to following directions, having a schedule that you have to follow. You can't turn off your video, or you can't tell your teacher, oh, I couldn't find my tablet wasn't charged, or whatever it was. So really a critical program. And we received a lot of feedback from our parents that really mentioned how concerned they were entering the summer of 2021 with their child's ability to get back to school the next year. And the success that this program had in preparing their child for that, getting them back to socialize with other children and those things. So again, I just want to close by saying I am incredibly honored to be here giving this presentation. It was, again, a revamp of the entire recreation department, and in particular, our neighborhood services staff, hundreds of staff, thousands of hours, and so much work to pull this off for the community. And to, I've always bragged about the way that recreation is able to pivot. The neighborhood services does these different programs. This was just the epitome of the ability to pivot and to see what the need of the community was and respond. And it's a great honor to be able to be here and represent all the work that those staff pulled off for the community. And with that, I will touch a little bit on passing on to Magali, but want to bring up that this was kind of the snapshot of what we did this year in a special circumstance, but the goal of neighborhood services, and we've been having a lot of conversations about this, and we actually moved our neighborhood services slides ahead of the violence prevention partnership slides for this reason, is we're really focused on providing a continuum of services for our youth. And we really feel strongly that neighborhood services' role in that is to be a safety net for the community, to create these programs that serve a broad spectrum of it and start building relationships with the youth, building relationships with the families, so that we're aware of what's going on in our community, we're aware of what our community needs are, and we're able to respond not just within recreation, not just within neighborhood services, but through the violence partnership and with all of our community organizations to get the families the services that they need. So just as we do with our participants and providing that continuum of services, I will now pass off to the Violence Prevention Partnership for their portion of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Jeff, and thank you, Geraldine, for covering the budget aspect of the presentation. I just want to take, oh, by the way, Magali Deyes, I'm the Director of Community Engagement. I just wanted to take a minute to kind of bring everyone up to date in terms of the focus and shift that we've made as a relatively newer team with renewed energy and perspectives. In terms of our activities in the last fiscal year, the focus has been on addressing and acknowledging the compounded traumas that this community has continued to face since the 2017 fires to where we're situated today, still unfortunately in a pandemic. Our strategy was to take a step back and educate ourselves and the community on what was at the forefront so that we can better be prepared and we can better respond and serve our community. So aside from the work that we're doing with our choice partner agencies, which we'll speak a little bit more about in a minute, we've also reached out to our colleagues from the California Violence Prevention Network. For those of you that may not be familiar with it, the CalVPN's mission essentially is to create a movement based on comprehensive approaches that focus on galvanizing the community-wide efforts and using an upstream approach to address community violence, which is very similar to how violence prevention is set up. So we want to learn everything that we can on how our regional partners are operating, as well as looking at their setup and structure, their best practices, et cetera, and thinking about how those can be scalable to our program, because we are looking at cities like, Oakland, as well as San Jose, and again, trying to figure out, how we can operate using their best practices locally. Our entire Measure O team created the first annual Wildfire Ready program, which spoke to the various concerns in community as they pertain to physical and mental safety from wildfires. We hosted a week-long series where Dr. Peter Nelson, a member of the Federated Indians of the Great Rancheria and a professor at UC Berkeley, educated us on prescribed burns as an ancestral practice, how and why good fire was an essential way of life in Sonoma County before the colonization of this land, and why it's important to continue to work with our local tribes on these practices. The team from Fire presented crucial information on prescribed burns, the wildland-urban interface, the WUI, funding for wildfire prevention, home hardening, and defensible space. And we also held a workshop which resonated with many of the comments that we heard time and time again from community members around our shared trauma with wildfires. We're very fortunate to have members from the Sonoma Community Resilience Collaborative provide resilience tools to manage times of crisis, as well as mechanisms on how to deal with stress from being triggered by smoke, fire alarms, and other nuances related to the fires. And because we do work with so many direct service providers and community advocates of color, we wanted to address and name where we're situated based on much of what 2020 has taught us, that many folks of color who are the boots on the ground were taking on additional stressors due to the climate that we find ourselves in and sort of how everything's culminated. And this needed to be addressed and recognized, so that we invited Dr. Daniela Dominguez to provide a presentation on self and community care as an act of resistance. And I believe this was especially needed for our younger advocates and our younger professionals out in the field doing a lot of this work. So next slide, please. So in terms of, so part of what was recently shifted in our community includes a greater acknowledgement for root problems like systemic racism, a lack of equity, and poverty. This idea that there are, sorry, I'm having a little bit of a glitch on my computer. So this idea that there are deep roots under our social challenges is an idea that the partnership has been elevating. Violence in Santa Rosa was previously described as a gang problem that came from outside our community. But on a deeper reflection and research, we learned that violence is rooted in social structures that exist inside Santa Rosa. And violence often erupts when one or more of these roots have taken hold in the community. And I'm just going to take a second to share what we do have the 10 roots of community violence outlined in our 2020 choice report. We'd love to share that with you all. Some of these roots of community violence come from families that are disconnected from community and support. Students do not reach their potential. Reentry is not supported. Families have poor access to health and mental health care. Prevention services are lacking. And one that is, we taken to heart here is that government has historically not prioritized fostering relationships with marginalized communities to assess and meet the needs. So that is one that we are actively working on. So, and we also want to recognize that we need to invest more deeply in providing support to our neighborhoods. And so the partnership provides grants to community partners to offer services that combat these roots of violence. And we see that through the Choice Grant Program, the Choice Mini Grant Program, and guiding people successfully. So we're just going to go to the next slide, please. There we go. So just to kind of go quickly through this, because I realize I have a lot of slides here. As you all know, the Choice Grant funds community-based organizations, all of which made the changes that they needed to make in order to continue providing services to community despite the obstacles provided by COVID. We're also able to redirect some of the funding to meet immediate needs in the community, such as food, face masks, hand sanitizers, some reading materials, and direct payments. And we've been working closer than ever with the wonderful team with Upstream Investments on implementing results-based accountability into our work, the work that we're doing and the work that our Choice partners are doing. So with RBA, we want to know three things. One, how did we do within our given program or initiative? Two, how well did we do it? And three, is anyone better off for it? So next slide, please. And then here, I just want to highlight that in further looking at evaluation results, we found that, Choice Cycle 10 services continue to incorporate a public health model spanning across multiple generations, incorporating both upstream preventative strategies as well as intervention components of preventing violence. And just a quick note, and you can see all of this in our report, 100 families received case management services to assist with finding childcare and other family support needs. And 76% of these families, youth were enrolled in childcare. So we're going to go to the next slide, please. And in terms of our, a little bit more on our Getting People Successfully program, Calvert funding started September 2018 with a COVID extension that took us to August 2021. And we've also been able to get an additional pass-through funding for LifeWorks, Social Advocates for Youth provided our mental health support services, and as well as paid job training with career readiness workshops. So that was really crucial and important during this time. So we can go to the next slide, please. And then here we can see that shortly after the fiscal year on August 2nd, in addition to this work that we're doing. So I know this is a little bit after we're, I guess getting into the next fiscal year, but I do not want to forget to mention that we do have a new GPS coordinator, Irma Cuevas, who many of you may already know, and has been doing incredible work since she hit the ground running on August 2nd. So we've been able to secure more funding through Sonoma County Probation through the end of fiscal year 2021, 2022, and looking forward to the work that Irma is going to be working on with our community. So the next slide, please. And I'm going to turn it back to Geraldine.
Hello again. So I'm going to be talking real quick about the Choice Cycle 10 extension. The partnership has decided to extend Cycle 10 for an additional 6 months. This will be January 2022 through June 30th, 2022. The extension is an effort to align the city's fiscal year budget and the Choice Cycle 11 RFQ with the 2022 Community Safety Scorecard update. There will be no gaps in funding. Grantees have been notified, And the partnership staff is currently preparing for the cycle 11 request for qualifications release. This timeframe will be July 2022 through January 2025. Next slide, please. And as reference, you can see here now that for the current fiscal year we're in, 2020 to 2021, our reserves have been reduced to approximately $164,000. And we have within the partnership, leadership decided to unfill the program manager position with a community outreach specialist. So this will help with the cost savings. And the division director will assume, Magali has been assuming the program manager role. The partnership is utilizing a community outreach specialist position to increase our level of community presence and impact. And we organized the choice grant cycle, and this is an effort to really be in line with the city's fiscal year, and also helps with the school year funding, because usually schools are preparing, in July to prepare services, and the nonprofits are aligned with that. And now I will turn it over to Jeff to discuss the next bullet point.
Yeah, thanks, Sherilyn. So within the neighborhood services section of that in our program budgets, obviously we're seeing the fact that the use of reserves is reaching the point that it's not going to be sustainable. I will say that the fiscal year 21-22 estimated reserves or our use of reserves this year, I think we will see some turn back on that as, again, projections of budgets and then what we're able to feasibly do as we still continue to recover and bring programs back from COVID, where last year it was a switch where we spent a tremendous amount of money to do the School of Rec program. This year we're in that phase of trying to get back to normalcy, and it is a one step forward, or I think at this point we've reached the 2 steps forward, 1 step back. So we do see that we are anticipating, but still too early in the fiscal year to be able to really change the estimate of what our budget is. But we do anticipate that we will be able to not use as much of those reserves to run the programs that we currently have. And then we're evaluating our neighborhood after school sites for possible program savings, and also some possibilities of leveraging those Measure O funds between our partnership, potentially with schools, future partnerships that could happen there, or with Burbank Housing, where there's some funding that could be available to help support the programs as well, which again would then leverage the Measure O funding to hopefully be able to maintain that level of service that we're doing while slowing down and minimizing the impact on the reserves.
Could I just go back really quick? I'm sorry. I think my slide deck had one of the slides off a little bit. There was a point that I really wanted to make sure to make in the looking forward. I'm sorry, Jeff, were you done? I didn't mean to interrupt you. Are we done? Okay. Okay, so I just wanted to give everyone sort of a heads up on looking ahead with Violence Prevention Partnership. We're looking at providing more cohesion between the partner agencies and our staff. Because of the uptick in youth violence, our team members have been sought out due to their level of expertise. And schools are requesting their presence more and more. We're looking at creating structures and borrowing more capacity from other city departments like recreation and our choice partners. So the need to have more specific programming that's trauma informed for 7th to 12th graders is great. We have a number of programs in the community that would love to be able to further connect. We would like to be able to further connect young people to, while also asking the question if these spaces are built for youth of color or if they've been designed with that in mind. Are there opportunities to shift towards that? If not, how do we participate in that process of connecting youth to spaces that can provide them with the sense of belonging, agency, and mentorship? And we're really looking at trauma-informed care and practices. And we're currently in the middle of an 8-month-long workshop being offered by the Hannah Institute that we're offering to our operations team on understanding race and trauma. And there's those are just a few of the items that we're looking into exploring in the future. And I, just wanted to make sure that you all were aware of where we're going moving forward. Thank you.
I do have a question. You mentioned the scorecard. Is there a release date for that yet?
Hi, Yvette. We are hoping to have it out within the first few weeks of January. We are very close to completion and working with our investment partners to get that done.
Okay. And the report out that you did was very comprehensive, and I'm grateful that you guys was able to pivot during the time of COVID. And so I wish there was more funding for you to do everything you want to do, but I appreciate all the work that you have put forward. So thank you for that.
I have a question too, Ellen, if nobody else has the floor. All right, I'll jump in. Jeff, I'm directing this one to you, I think. I know there was a budget uptick in terms of personnel costs this year. And my question, which I don't know if you covered or not, was that additional new staff or was it overtime pay? What were the specifics behind the bump up in personnel costs?
I don't know the specific answer to. I don't know if admin, if a finance person is able to jump on. My speculation of it would be, increase in minimum wage and increased cost of living. And then I don't know. I don't think there's new positions. Magali, let me know if that's different for your team. I know that you guys did the backfill, but it could be some positions that have been frozen in previous years that are now filled. As that we, through the previous couple of years, we have had some freezes on filling positions that may have been vacant and then were refilled.
So we don't have any, sorry.
Does it have to do with the increase of, with the rec of school? I mean, it was a lot of man hours that went into putting that program on.
Yeah, so that wouldn't have changed as far as permanent staff. That wouldn't have had an impact. I mean, there may have been a little bit of overtime with that program, but nothing that would dramatically increase it. But the number of from our temporary employees was certainly the goal was run the program and meet the need. And I think it's one of the real blessings we have with a resource like this that's a local funding source is we didn't have to sit around and wait to see, can we adjust our funding to do something like this when the community needed it? We were able to jump right in and provide that programming. So in terms of the temporary staffing, this is by far, yes, absolutely the most extensive and costly program that we've ever run in recreation within the temporary staff budgets. And that was across the board with Measure O and with general fund.
Well, in my opinion, it was money well spent, because good heavens, could there ever be a time when these programs were more needed or more difficult to run? So kudos for pulling it off. I have one more question, and this one is directed at Ms. Tellez, because when I was scouring over the reports and I was looking on page 32, where it lists all the members of the violence prevention policy team, I noticed that Sonoma State wasn't listed. And this is something that was of concern for Dr. Jill Jones, and I'm sure for Dr. Manza Atkinson, SSU chemistry professor. So we wanted to inquire as to whether Sonoma State will be on future lists.
I think that's an important, most definitely an important partner that we want, right? And right, shame on me for, leaving out my first love, Sonoma State, 17 years. So yeah, most definitely we can work on how do we, whom from Sonoma State would be able to attend and participate, because I think We, again, pulling capacity from left and right to try to make sure we're addressing all of the gaps.
Well, Dr. Jones is already attending. We just want credit for it.
Okay, we will fix that. My
Yeah,
apologies.
there's actually a couple, when he can't make it, there's some others that do attend those meetings. So they are already a part of the partnership and the policy team. They just wasn't listed, so.
We will make sure that we update that ASAP.
And of course, I'm saying that somewhat humorously, but we'd love to be listed. Thank you.
I had a question. Oh, Ellen, I see your hand up.
Go ahead, Elias, it's fine.
Okay. Yeah, just, man, amazing. Just really want to commend all the amazing work y'all doing. I think y'all presentation was really on point. I really enjoyed the pictures. And I know some of my nieces and cousins got to partake in those things, and it was really cool for them having a place to go, during COVID. And yeah, just really want to really commend you all, because you all are really doing the, gang prevention and intervention that this whole Measure O was created for, because, having different people of different cultures and backgrounds painting together, playing basketball, being at Finley Park together will definitely, in hopes of, in the future, them not having to inflict violence upon each other, right? Because, right, that's what we're currently dealing with. So I wanted to ask, has law enforcement, a large proponent of that receives funding, have they provided any funding or any, support for these activities that are really, involved in gang prevention and intervention?
Go ahead, Jeff.
I was just gonna say, in terms of the School of Rec program, and I feel horrible because I'm blanking on the name of the program right now. But I know that we did do some partnership with that, and that there was a program that was brought in that the police department helped support to go into the cohorts and do some presentations. And again, I'm sorry, I don't have the specifics of it. I know police are reporting later, and it may be part of their annual report as well for a program that they ran this past year through the School of Rec.
Oh, okay. What were those presentations about? Do you remember? You don't have to tell me the name of them, but
I don't. Again,
that's okay.
It was a little bit. It was as we went in. I wasn't involved with the program at that point, but there was presenters that came each week, and I mean, generally like life skills and as kind of an overview of the program. But I was not involved with the curriculum or the specifics of it. But I could get more information of that if it's not presented later on in the police portion of it.
And I could just speak in terms of our programs. Well, we had Dr. Sharon Washington present on Tipping the Scales, really just breaking down structural racism for us. That's a program that we shared with our community, we shared with our team, with many of the staff. I know I reached out to Chief Navarro and Chief Westrope, and I think there was, I can't remember specifically off of the top of my head, but I know there was a significant percentage of Chief Navarro's team that attended that presentation and learned from Dr. Sharon Washington's presentation, as well as some of the folks from the fire department, and Chief Westrope supported that. In addition, we've been holding our crisis response team meetings and really building that. And law enforcement, in terms SRPD, has been present in supplying us with the information that they're able to share regarding the incidents that are occurring, so that our crisis response team could better kind of grasp the situation and figure out how we mobilize people to get some connect them to resources.
Okay, cool, thank you. Great. And then let me just ask a follow-up question in regards to just like prevention and intervention. I understand how you said, I know when something does happen, they can relay information about like maybe where are the affected areas, but in regards to like the prevention and intervention, have they, participated in any of the activities you all spoke about, or just like in that specific that you know of. They probably will go over in their presentation, but I just wanted to ask.
Yeah, I probably want to make sure that I answer that appropriately, only because I'm fighting a giant migraine right now. I'm so sorry.
It's okay. Yeah. Well,
So I'm
yeah,
trying to like,
if it comes to you, yeah, because I know they're coming up next, so I'll be asking them too. But cool, thanks.
but I will be around though in case there are other questions for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure. All right, thank you. All right, Ellen, you can go ahead.
Thanks. I just wanted to ask, I couldn't hear you, Geraldine, when someone asked you about the scorecard and I couldn't understand you. I had a Google problem here. My house is wired for sound and we got music from somewhere. I don't know where. I can't hear you.
Oh, we can't hear you, Geraldine.
I wrote it down. She said it will be coming out in January 2022.
Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you very much. That's it. It's just a really important, as we're looking at the sunsetting of Measure O, that we need that information. So I'm really glad to hear it'll be available. And I just wanted to thank everyone for all the work that you've been doing in recreation and community services. And it's, I agree with that. While the comments everyone else said, it's, you rallied when children needed you the most and families needed you the most. And my only wish would we could have had more, but I really appreciate the hard work and the dedication to meeting the needs of the children, especially during this really challenging time. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
I did want to take one quick second. I believe I'd heard from the Oversight Committee some questions about STEM programming. And so I did want to, I've meant to mention it, and it's for future, that we are working with Robotics for All and have gone into agreement for 3 different curriculums for age groups of K1, 2 through 3, 2, 3, and then 4 through 6. That will be starting in our neighborhood services after school program starting in January. So we're excited to be bringing that program on, and I think a model that we're hoping to replicate for services across the board of their strength in numbers, and we're always stronger when we work with everyone in our community to provide these programs. So an update, as I know that was an interest of this Oversight Committee.
Hi, hopefully you can hear me now. This is Carolyn, and I wanted to add that the Choice Grant Program funds LambPass iSchool program, and it's a hands-on learning. It's a curriculum that's aligned with school and state standards for science, art, and physical education. There are 2 in-classroom presentations. There's 4 field trips. The LambPass works directly with the teachers to develop the curriculum. They do repetitive activities, the connection to nature and being alone, and using that as a resource when, a lot of our youth are dealing with trauma, but they have a resource that they can go out to that doesn't cost anything, and it's in their it's within their area. And they also do educational games and play a role to field discovery. So what kind of branches or trees or whatever it is that they're doing that thing, or what they can find in nature so they can connect with it. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that, Jeff.
Thank you, VPP, for your presentation. I just want to jump in real quick and do a time check. It is 5:05, and I know we were hoping to adjourn this meeting at 5 o'clock. So thank you, everybody, for hanging on for the next 2 departments, and we'll try to be timely in our presentation and hopefully Q&A as well. Thanks. And here's fire.
Okay, this is Jim Arend. I'm the ASO for the fire department, and I'll be going over the financial slide, starting with the next slide, please, on 21. As you can see, we had a starting fund balance of 3.1 million, and we had revenues of 4.56 and expenditures of 3.9. So we ended up with a surplus of $264,000 to bring our fund balance up to 3.3. At this point, I'd like to point out that that's a planned surplus. A large chunk of Measure O for us is we don't spend it on purpose because we accumulate it over time for helping us to build and reconstruct and repair existing fire stations. So that's what we're doing with that extra funding right there. Next slide, please. These are the expenditures, a breakdown of that. And as you can see from the chart up in the corner, 85% of the expenditures on Measure O are spent on salary and benefits. Another 9% is on debt service for a fire station, and then 3% for administration. So we're really only left with 3% in service and supplies, which we would consider to be a little discretionary. So we're pretty careful about the way we spend our money because our goal is not to maintain a positive fund balance, but we want to grow that balance so we've got something we can do with it for the community as far as building better stations. Just as a quick recap on the financials, salaries, if you were to look at the last year compared to this year, we're up almost $60,000. And that was really based on we had a longtime employee that had a large retirement payout, and it drove the salary number up over the prior year. Benefits were up $26,000, primarily with workers' comp and health insurance. And service and supplies were down about $33,000 based on reduced vehicle maintenance that we did on some of our vehicles. So that was a good news. So overall, expenditures were up about $56,000 for the year. We were not it wasn't unexpected. Next slide, please. This kind of is telling. This again shows you the same slide that you're going to see for all the segments. And this is revenues versus expenditure. And I'm happy to report that our revenues are ahead of expenditures again as last year, if you recall, because of COVID. And with revenues on sales tax being down, we actually dipped below and had our expenditures were higher than the revenues, but we're right back up into positive territory here. And you're seeing the differential between the two in the corner is a net increase of about $265,000, which we will be using for stations. And with that, I'm going to pass on to Chief Westrup so he can tell you some of the operational things.
Thanks, Jim. Good afternoon, Chair Bailey and members of the committee. Scott Westrup, Fire Chief for the City of Santa Rosa. I'll get through these slides as quick as I can. So in talking about the positions that Measure O funds, and we'll get more into this on the next slide, but we have 3 fire captains, which are our frontline supervisors, a fire captain assigned to training. This is the position that staffs our 6-acre training facility on West College Avenue. 3 fire engineers, which are the driver operators of the equipment, and 3 firefighters. It also provides 25% of the funding for our EMS battalion chief or emergency medical services battalion chief that manages our EMT and paramedic program. And then lastly, it provides the paramedic incentive pay for those members that are on the truck companies. So we essentially, with Measure O, we're able to upgrade our truck companies from a BLS level of service or basic life support level of service to a paramedic level service through Measure O. Next slide, please. A little bit more in detail of the impacts of Measure O to the fire department. As we stated before, it provides 9 firefighters or 9 positions and a training captain. So all said and done, it's 10.25 FTEs. It supplied 3 fire engines and 2 fire trucks, the ability to be paramedic units. And then with that, about 65% of our calls are for emergency medical service. So the oversight and management of that program is vital. So the funding for the battalion chief position that oversees our EMS program. And then with the ability to add stations, add people, add resources to the road, and add that level of service, it increases our response times based on our deployment analysis. It reduces fire loss, it improves EMS patient outcomes. It increases our ability to provide community outreach. And then obviously it financed the construction of Fire Station 5. Next slide, please. The fire stations that Measure O has helped us build are Fire Station 10, which was constructed in 2008. That serves Southwest Santa Rosa. Fire Station 11, which opened in 2009, that serves the junior college central area of Santa Rosa. And then the Fire Station 5 that was up on Newgate Court, which was completed in July of 2015. And as we've talked about several times, that's the fire station that burned down in the Tubbs fire. So before Vice Chair Minor asked the question, I will just touch on the construction of the new Station 5 in the area of Stagecoach and Fountain Grove. We're still in escrow on that piece of property. We've just completed the tribal assessment of the property, and that passed. And then we're currently approaching the public comment phase of the CEQA and NEPA processes. That station is funded through community block grant funding. And the good news is if as we move through the process with the CDBG funding, we have to have a shovel in the ground by, I believe it's July of 22. So we're kind of pushed by that funding source. So hopefully we'll start seeing some movement on that property in the next year. Next slide, please. Measure O also provides us specialty equipment, and some of the equipment that we've used Measure O to purchase are 2 Type 1 fire engines, which is the frontline fire engine that you see on the road every day, engine 10 on the right-hand side of your screen. 1 Type 3 wildland fire engine, which is the engine 25 there on the bottom left. 4 command vehicles, which are the SUVs that we use for command and control, and the Swiftwater rescue trailer, which was actually pressed into service about a week and a half ago when we had the rainstorm on that Sunday and had to evacuate 95 residents in an apartment complex in Bennett Valley. And with that, I will turn it back over to Jim to finish up the financial aspect looking ahead. You're muted, Jim.
Okay, go to slide 29, if you will. And you'll see this is the looking ahead at what we're looking at the current year right now, or 21-22. It's expected with the budgeted revenues and the budgeted expenditures that we're going to dip into the reserves for $28,000. I actually don't think that's going to happen. I did my own little look back, and you have to realize when we do the budget, it's early in the year. It's probably December, January, the year before. And we had Measure O revenues of just over $4 million that projected for 21-22. I'm guessing that we're probably going to blow right by that one, because the 2021 revenues ended up at almost $4.3 million. So I sincerely doubt that our sales tax revenues are going to go down in 21-22. I think they're probably going to come closer to matching 2021. And if that were the case, we're actually going to go back up where we expect to be, which is with a surplus and not a shortfall as it's showing here. So that's what I wanted to say about this one. So we'll be prepared if we need to dip into our reserves, but that's not my favorite thing to do. We have a purpose for that money, and I'd like to keep building it if we can, because these stations are becoming more and more expensive. And, $3 million, if we have that at the end, is barely going to start a station. So the more we put aside, the better it'll be for all of us. And with that, I'll open the floor to any questions.
I just want to say thank you, Scott, Chief Scott, for providing me that information about the stations, because I was going to ask. So thank you for that. In advance.
No problem. I expect it, and so I just figured I'd be proactive in it.
As a Bennett Valley resident, just also a quick thanks for all the help. Was it last weekend or 2 weekends ago? It's nice to know that that trailer came in handy.
Yeah, that was a bit of a different event for us in that we went from a red flag fire weather conditions 2 weeks prior to the largest rainfall that Sonoma County's ever seen in 24 hours. And so we were able to respond. We used the mutual aid system, and our crews did a fantastic job of deploying and getting those residents out of harm's way. And fortunately, we were able to subvert any major damage to any residents. So thank you for that.
I wanted to thank you also. I live in Bennett Valley and I was out of town and I kept reading about it in the paper and calling my friends, calling my neighbors, and I want to really appreciate it. And it's quite a shock to go from being terribly worried about fire to then being worried about money, or not money, rain. And so it's just kind of we have to be quick on pivoting, and you were. So thank you very much for that.
Okay. If there are no other questions, we'll pass it off to the police department. Thank you.
Thank you, Fire, and police will finish up our presentation here.
Great, good afternoon. I'm Pam Lawrence, ASO for the police department. Thanks for being here. Next slide, please. So this slide, as you've seen with the other departments, it shows you our overall picture. So we started our beginning fund balance with $756,000. We had a higher than expected revenue of $4.2 million. And we had expenses or expenditures of just over $4 million, leaving us a balance in our reserve fund of $958,000. Next slide, please. So this is a pie chart that shows you where our money is spent. And as you can see, the majority of the funding is spent on salaries, about 93% of that, salaries and benefits. That leaves us $171,796 to spend on services and supplies. And this supports our downtown enforcement team office, which is in the transit mall. That's a really critical piece of our department. It helps us keep the staff downtown where they're needed. We also do maintenance for some Measure O vehicles and motorcycles out of this fund. And then we spend $116,000, which is the general fund overhead. Our total expenses this year, as I said, were just over $4 million, which is down from the prior year, about $150,000. And that's due mostly due to freezing 2 school resource officer positions in anticipation of reduced revenues. Next slide, please. So this is the same slide as Jim Aaron showed you for fire, but this is for police. Shows you what our revenues and expenditures have done since the inception of the program. Our expenditures have outpaced our revenues, and this is due mostly for salaries and the benefits that we have 19 positions in this fund right now. This last year, as you can see, our expenditures were down slightly over the revenues, and that was due to those 2 frozen school resource officer positions. I'll hand it off to Captain Cregan, who will talk to you more about the operational parts for this funding.
Thank you so much. My name is John Cregan. I'm a captain with the police department, and I'll go over a couple of the positions, what we're using more specifically. So as our ASO Lawrence talked about, that we have 19 positions for this fiscal year that had been part of the Measure O funds. And if you look at the first part here, it talks about 14 sworn positions. So the lieutenant position, it's a very critical position for us. And it's our special event, our traffic, our downtown enforcement manager, and they also look at our emergency management. And as you know, in Santa Rosa, emergencies that we're seeing on a regular basis. So this lieutenant manages our response to the glass fire incident in September of 20, and then also dealt with our COVID response throughout the city with our internal practices for the safety of our staff, but also working with some of the engagement with our local businesses and community members of following the county public health order. The sergeant position is for our downtown enforcement team, and that's for our officers who focus on the downtown core and also address homeless issues throughout our city and be able to work with our Catholic Charities and our host team, with our city's housing and community services, and some of the other key stakeholders here in our community. We have 7 police officers that were funded this year in that, and that is 2 of those officers are directly in the downtown enforcement team. 2 officers are our traffic team. So those are motorcycle officers addressing collisions and traffic safety throughout our city. And the other remaining officers were supplementing our patrol resources. And for this fiscal year, we had the 5 officers that were dedicated to the school resource officer team. ASO Lawrence talked about how 2 of those positions were frozen mid-year, and eventually at the end of the year, we eliminated the other 3 positions as we looked at some of the declining revenue for Measure O and some of the projections that we saw in that. We also have 5 civilian positions, and these are really crucial positions that really enhance our level of service as well. First 2 are the field evidence technicians, and that's a vital role, and they process any crime scene. So any violent crime scene, a homicide scene, stabbing, shootings, fatal collisions, they go out, and it's so critical for us with the expectations of our community and our court system to have true experts. We're able to go out, process those scenes, and make sure that it's collected in a fair way that can be presented in court one day. The next is a community service officer. The CSO position goes to traffic collisions, no suspect information like burglaries and other calls for service throughout our city. The dispatch supervisor, and that plays such an important role when we do some of the mass evacuations and assisting with the supervision and management of our dispatch team. And then the police technician, and that's our records technician who works to make sure that we're able to, in an efficient time manner provide police reports and other data to community members who come into the police department requesting that, whether it be a collision report or whether it be a burglary report or any other type of data that we can do provide to a community member. We can go to the next slide, please. So generalize some more about what happens with these positions that I just gave you a brief overview. So the first thing is enhancing our patrol services. So by having the dedicated traffic teams, they're able to focus on some of those key specialized resources, such as the traffic enforcement, working radar and LiDAR, and going to some of each week the traffic department does a special enforcement area based on collision rates and based on community complaints regarding traffic issues in their neighborhood or business community. They also work on providing traffic and education, and they'll go into sometimes to the schools and other businesses, do things with car safety, with seatbelt safety, and a lot of other extra programs like that. Also, our downtown enforcement team obviously focuses on the downtown core, but also works with our homeless population throughout the city. And like I talked about earlier, really works especially with the host team and some of the others to start providing services, because we understand that arresting people for low-level homeless related offenses doesn't benefit the community and doesn't benefit those who are in need of sheltering. So we're really working on more of that upstream approach to be able to provide some of the services that this vulnerable population in our community needs. We talked about in some of the earlier presentations, you heard from Magali Tejas talking about our collaboration with the Violence Prevention Partnership. And that's such a key thing. We have representatives both on the monthly operational team and on the policy team. We talked about the crisis response team that we've been a part of. We've been part of the choice grant review process of assisting and selecting some of the needy different organizations throughout our community that can provide services. And then working with some of the things that we partnered with them on of providing the GREAT program, which is gang resistance education and training of going into 5th grade schools, and working with some of the young people, focusing on the 2 key areas of the prevention and intervention. And that's a key area that the police department wants to continue to put additional focus in. This year, we are proud to be able to launch in this last fiscal year the community engagement team. And this is a team that's going out in our community, working with some of our local nonprofits, working with the Violence Prevention Partnership to be able to meet some of the people in our community, hear very importantly, like what are some of the community desires and needs and what's the direction they want to see the police department head into in our future. And also our additional patrol resources allowed us to send more officers to training. Last year, that our training department provided over 100 hours of advanced officer training to every single one of our officers in the department. Next slide, please. We talked about with our event planning, our traffic supervisors, and then with these additional resources, how it helps us with our improved response time to local emergencies. For the glass fire, we evacuated areas of Rincon Valley and Skyhawk and Bennett Valley, Oakmont. That's a very labor intensive process for our staff, and the police departments are in charge of city evacuations and these things. That was a mandatory all call for our staff, that every police officer in the city was responded to assist with that emergency. And certainly these additional resources were vital in being able to provide a safe and efficient evacuation of those neighborhoods. Continuing to work, as we all know, the homeless issues in Santa Rosa are continuing to grow, and it's something that we've invested a lot of city resources into. The police department continues to play a key role in that, with our downtown enforcement team being really our most active team involved with some of our homeless outreach providers here in our city. The chief also created the Chief's Community Ambassador Team this year, and that's 15 different representatives from all areas of our city that come together and meet on a monthly basis to be able to bring forward some community concerns to our chief. We've addressed several policy changes and procedural changes that we've given to this team, and that's something that we want to continue to use the resources from our teams to be able to get that feedback from their community. Another partnership idea is the Mary Lou vehicle, and that's being led by our community engagement team that's being able to work with that, and we're partnering with them to be able to bring that to our community. Next slide, please. So one more slide, if you don't mind, we'll finish this out. So looking ahead, as you see right here, and ASO Lawrence can go into a little bit more details with these, but we're going to end this or starting this next fiscal year with $953,000 in our reserves. Now, some of the things that we've done is because of some of the projected decline in our revenue, we eliminated 3 of the full-time employee positions from the Measure O fund. So we went from a high of 19 to now 16 police officers, our positions funded in there. So we eliminated 3 sworn police officer positions from the Measure O funding, and those have been eliminated from the police department's overall budget. This is going to be a year that we're looking toward as we look toward the end of the Measure O program, and we look toward all the staff pieces that are part of the police department budget as we start reimagining where our budget is going to be with Measure O, and looking at where these staffing changes are going to be made and what other priorities we do. And that's going to be where community feedback, some of the continued community listening sessions that we're going to be launching this year, and working with our community engagement team and our Chief's Community Ambassador team to set some of those priorities for us as we go into this new fiscal year. So I know I went through that information very quickly. So if we go to the next slide, I'd love to take any questions or give any more further follow-up for any of those things that we went through.
Yeah, I got a question. I wanted to ask, I saw in there you're working with the violence partnership. What exactly are you all doing together?
Well, some of the things we're doing is participating. So we have officers and supervisors attend each one of the operational meetings. So we go there, we meet with a host of nonprofits that are represented as part of the Violence Prevention Partnership, and we address whether they be community concerns. We bring forward to those operational meetings of referrals. So if we go out and we hear of a young man or a young woman in our community who's struggling, needs some additional resources, and the police department has interacted with them, we bring those referrals, and we want to be an active part of that, of saying, hey, this is a young man who needs some resources, and we give the specific information, and we reach out to the other nonprofits that are there to see who is the best person who can help that young individual. So we've had some good examples, like with Double Punches is one that's been participated for years with the Violence Prevention Partnership, and then we'll be able to make a referral to get a young teenager involved in that program and get them some of the resources. The chief and I attend each one of the policy team meetings, and we talk about what are some of the crime trends, what are some of the concerns, whether it be with fentanyl overdoses, whether it be with a rise in ghost guns in our community. And we work to strategize with some of the policy team makers to see where can we best be putting some of the resources going forward. The crisis response team, and that's what Magali Tejas had mentioned. So if we have a homicide, we've had 6 homicides in the city of Santa Rosa this year, which is alarming for us, but we work with the Violence Prevention Partnership to let them know, hey, we had a homicide occur. These are some of the concerns. How can we work to be able to get some information and some support out in the community for those? We've worked with them with the GREAT program going into the schools, and we continue. We have daily contact with members of the Violence Prevention Partnership, Gustavo Mendoza and Magali Tejas, and each one of those members and a host of the other team members that we have contact with. and be able to work as key city partners of assisting each other, because we understand that responding to the call is just the first stage for us, and that we need to be able to provide some upstream approach and some holistic help to those in the community, whether they be a victim of a crime or whether they're someone who they've had a family member who's been arrested for an offense.
Okay, yeah. Okay, great. And I think, you know, what you just said was funny. You said our first type of contact is responding to the calls. And I think that's the biggest disconnect that I know you want to hear our first presentation, but, you know, me and, you know, Jeff also got to discuss is, you know, a major proponent for voters approving Measure O was the fact that it was, you know, gang prevention and intervention, you know, and I understand that, you know, it to many officers, you may be the one responding. So it's like the violence has already occurred. But I think, you know, we've had many talks, you know, with the police department. And unfortunately, this presentation you're showing me is almost the exact same thing as last time. And we had I don't know if you were here, but we had a pretty robust conversation about different ways of collaboration and possibly using, you know, funds that, you know, may be available from you all to go to the community as a way to develop and cultivate like these trusting relationships. So that could, you know, reduce violence that could occur. So, you know, I hate to be asking you these things because you weren't here last time, but to be honest, you know, and I don't know if you were here earlier, but I did ask the Violence Partnership, you know, how is law enforcement participating? And they did say you all are attending those meetings, you know, but it must go beyond attending meetings. And I know, and I know it does, but even providing referrals, I think, you know, as you know, and this is, I hate to say it again, but before we even approved this budget, you know, we were already knowing after COVID, people have no money, you know, people have been cooped up. And I know everybody here remembers, you know, as someone that's a direct service provider, just communicating that, you know, people are, you know, they're on the last wits, you know, just economically and due to, as Magali stated earlier, just these systemic inequalities that are that have been harboring for so long. And when they do result in shootings and this and that, like she had mentioned earlier, it's because of other inequalities that, you know, aren't being situated. And you know, long story short to say, I really do hope that, you know, and I'm really demanding, honestly, as a person on this oversight committee, that the relationship has to go much farther than just attending meetings and really developing relationships, because we already know where the violence is unfortunately going to happen. You know, we've already identified the neighborhoods and communities that are participating in this, you know, quote unquote gang violence. So, but I do appreciate your presentation, but I did wish that, you know, you all had more, but it's almost the exact same thing that you all presented before this. So yeah, that's just my comment on that.
All right, I really appreciate that. And you bring up some valuable points. I just want to make sure the one thing that we don't gloss over, some key things that we're added this year, is the creation of the community engagement team. So that's going out, a team of officers and who are going out in the community, working with some of the local nonprofits, going and meeting with their community and doing exactly that, engaging with them and learning, like, how can we better serve this community? How can we provide the resources? And also a key component that Chief Navarro added this year is the community ambassador team. And that's another one that we've heard so much over the last few years about. We have to do a better job of hearing directly from our community. What are some of the concerns, and not making decisions like in the silo of just the police department command staff, but getting feedback from our community. And so that's where we have 15 key community stakeholders who meet directly with the chief on a monthly basis. They're hearing what are some of the concerns, how can we better be deploying our resources before we make policy changes. And we've talked about things like with the long range acoustic device, which we got a lot of heated community feedback on. And the chief's community ambassador team played a key role in helping us develop some of the needed changes with that instrument. The same thing with like the license plate reader program and all these things that community ambassador team has provided input. And in some areas said, you guys are going in the wrong direction. You need to make changes. And the chief was able to take that and use some of that feedback, but also understanding that you're 100% right. It's more than just going to meetings. And I think that's where that crisis response team comes in as a perfect example of that. That's not just going to meetings. That's when we have a homicide in our community, 6 of them this year, where then our officers met with members from community engagement, strategized on how we can provide better resources. And when we're talking about preventing future violence, that's where we started going to those neighborhoods and trying to ease some of the tensions with the key community engagement team. And Gustavo Mendoza is so well respected in the community and has the trust and legitimacy from so many in our community. And by partnering with him and some of his partners, we're able to reduce future acts of violence occurring, whether it be gang retaliation, whatever it may be. So I think those are some examples where we really have taken some proactive steps. But I really take this feedback and understand what are some things that we can even make future improvements, because you bring up very valuable points, and we need to take that and learn as our police leadership how we can make some of those improvements. So I appreciate that.
I do have a excuse me. I do have a comment in relation to what Elliot said. I have been a part of some of those conversations that they have had as far as the police department and the community engagement team, and they have been very productive for the community members. So I do want to throw that out, Elias, that they are out here actively doing things. If you're not a part of that conversation, I'm sure that, you know, Chief John Cregan can provide you with that information to be a part of those conversations. And if you would like to have more input, I'm sure that is available for you to do. I'm sure if you take the time to have a conversation with the chief and express those concerns on a higher level, or even have them come back to any of your particular groups, I'm sure they can assist you in that conversation. But I have been a part of some of those conversations in the community, and they get very raw. And so it's not glazing over anything. We're bringing the conversation to the police and saying, hey, people are not cool with that particular subject matter or whatever it is. And they get really deep in the conversation. So again, I urge you, if you have the time to be a part of those conversations, definitely do that. And I was also a part of, you know, recently they had some dialogue over the sideshows recently here in Roseland. So they are doing that community engagement piece that you had asked for in the previous meeting. And for some reason, you're not getting that information. So I urge you, if there's a need to be a part of a email list or something like that, to make sure you connect with them on that level.
No, thank you. I think I want to be honest with you, John. You know, me and the chief have had a lot of conversations, and for people that don't know, you know, I'm a case manager. I work with you know, young people, and you know, I've had John, I should just ask. This was something I brought up last meeting, but has a police auditor been hired?
That we've had some exciting developments on that. So that's one of the things that comes under my division as the police auditor. So we're in the final stages of the contract right now. And we hope we were actually working today on a council agenda item. So I think by the end of the month, you'll see that going before city council, announcing that a new police auditor will be in place. So we're working on the final contract with the police independent auditor. So that's going to be an exciting step. And it's something that our community has wanted for some time. And so our city manager's office, that they're the ones who actually signed the contract with the police auditor, and they're finalizing that right now. And by the end of the year, we will have one in place for the city of Santa Rosa. And I think it's something that's a long time coming.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's great news. And yeah, Yvette, to your point, I think, you know, I have been involved with conversations, and even me personally, you know, as you know, with my own story, you know, I was, you know, wrong place or wrong time. And, you know, John, you had brought up these ghost guns, you know, and, you know, while I was recording officer, I was accused of, you know, harboring stolen guns, you know, as a person that technically, you know, works through the county providing resources. And I did report it, you know, and the chief did speak to those officers. So, you know, I'm definitely still engaged in those talks, but, you know, like you said, obviously these things take time, and I appreciate you taking this, you know, from hearing your voice, I can tell, you know, you are serious about this, and I hope to see the results, you know, in the prevention and intervention. So, yeah, I don't want to be too long-winded.
if I can just interrupt really quick, I'm so sorry. I just wanted to make sure that I was able to answer some of those questions that came up. And I just want to echo everything that member Minor said and Captain Cregan mentioned. We have a number of projects that we're working on in collaboration with SRPD. And we also want to be mindful of each community group, because there are some community members that have actively asked for more presence and more interaction. And some other community members have really asked for some space and some time for healing and thinking about what that healing looks like. So we are looking at, communities on individual scales as well, and not looking at every, not even in neighborhoods as a monolith, because if we just take one neighborhood like Roseland, I mean, the gamut on their want and need of participation with police is just, it's all over the place. So again, I just want to reiterate that SRPD is definitely been supporting the work since we started here last summer. And I also just want to offer my email. I don't think there's a chat box item, but I'd love to hear more of your ideas and any input that you have when it comes to our the programming that we're coming up with for violence prevention. Thank you.
And I have one last question. In relation to the revenue, if there should happen to be an increase, and I guess this could probably be for all departments, but particularly for the police, if there happens to be an increase in revenue, how would you utilize that particular increase if there is one?
I'll have maybe ASO Lawrence look at that with the revenue increases.
Sure, thank you. So we would definitely want to evaluate depending on how much the revenue increased. And as you may be aware, we are looking at COLAs for all of our staff. So some of that will be used up in the COLAs if that is passed in the next couple of weeks. So we'll be utilizing it for that, and then possibly, I don't believe that we would be adding any more positions at this point, since there is an end date for Measure O, but there are a lot of critical supplies that we need. We need to renew our body worn camera contract, and that's coming up in the next year. There's also some, John, Captain Cregan, you might have a better idea of other supplies that we might be looking at buying, but we use this as, just like fire uses it as a savings account for some larger purchases that we're looking. Our building is outdated. There's a lot of new technology that we're looking at that we might need to help streamline some services, helping with investigations, that sort of thing. So we have a very long list, and we're hoping revenues will come in higher than expected so that we can start achieving some of those goals.
Oh, sorry, you had said, I think you used the acronym COLAS, you said?
Yeah, so the cost of living, where our contracts have been under negotiations for over a year. So it's looking at the end of that time now. Sorry.
I have a question for Officer Cregan.
Yes, sir.
First, I'd like to thank you for your day-to-day sacrifice and your commitment to the community. You mentioned.
Oh, I think your audio is cutting out. Is it just me?
No, I can't hear you either.
Let me see. How about now?
Your volume is very low.
It's low?
If you come closer to the screen, we can hear you better.
Okay, all right. How about now?
There you go.
Okay. Officer Cregan, I'd first like to thank you for your day-to-day sacrifice and your commitment to the community. I seen in one of your slides that officers who receive money, receive part of their funding from Measure O, had over 100 hours of training. And I was wondering if some of that training involved implicit bias training.
Yeah, so that is part of our, so last year's cycle, looking at this budget year, we did a procedural justice and implicit bias training. And actually right now we're having a new implicit bias training that we sent some 4 officers to what they call principled policing train the trainer course. And so we're developing a new implicit bias training that we're going to be launching in October of this year. So that's something that each year that we do a minimum set of training on procedural justice, de-escalation, implicit bias training, racial profiling, different segments of it. And so that's what they did for this last cycle. It was a procedural justice / implicit bias. And we're looking at another cycle of that coming up this year.
You said that was on per person, how many hours of training per person, how many hours of training would that include?
So each of those blocks were 4 hours for the implicit bias and the procedural justice. So, and for us, we have a lot of state mandated training. So as far as like a host of different issues that we go in, but we build that in as a minimum. And that's something though, that quite honestly, we want to put more of a focus on, is building some of that training. And we didn't even get to talk today about one of the exciting developments with our new mental health response team that we're going to have called In Response, that we're launching in a few weeks from now. So with that, we really want to build in more crisis intervention training and mental health training for officers, because our community has been loud and clear that we want to see officers learn more how to de-escalate these situations and how to resolve some of these tense mental health and substance abuse calls without resulting in force. So that's going to be something that, as we look forward into the future, you're going to see more of an emphasis, and that's going to be some of the things that we're dedicating more training dollars and more training time to be able to do.
You have a collaborative partner with the development of your implicit bias training?
Yeah, so they were working with Community Matters, is a local nonprofit that has been collaborating with us. And then we're also going to we have a new DEI officer, Socorro Shields, with the city of Santa Rosa. So actually she was here just on Friday with us and meeting, and we're designing the course outline for that. So Socorro Shields, who has a host of expertise in this area, was meeting with help and is one of our key design partners with helping us create this. But Community Matters was the nonprofit who was helping us with putting our program together. And it's going to be launched in we already have it on the training schedule. And so it'll be mandatory for every officer, actually every staff member in the police department from October to December of 2022, because we have to kind of project out our training schedule for quite a while because it gets so full.
Thank you, Officer Cregan.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Captain Cregan. I really appreciate it. And I really appreciate all the questions and thoughtful comments from the committee as well. And do we have any public members that have joined us since the meeting started, or can we now go on to the next procedural step?
So the next step would be to take public comment on item 4.1.
Okay, are there any members of the public available to ask anything, ask any questions? Or
there's 12 attendees, yes.
I'm sorry, what?
There are 12 attendees, and I'm not sure if they have any questions. They'll raise their hand if you. I'm seeing no hands raised.
Okay, great. Then I think the next thing to do is to ask for someone to make a motion to approve the annual report. And we just someone to second that, and then we will vote on it.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay, great. And then let's vote. Everyone who votes to approve of the annual report, please raise your hand.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, all 4 except Hennett. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Is that a no from him, or is he abstaining?
Yeah, it's a nay. Yeah, I didn't see no change, so yeah, it's my vote.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, everyone. I appreciate your participation of the committee and of all the staff and interested people that I can't see. But thank you very much for that. And this is calling into the meeting.
Thank you, everyone.
Nice seeing everybody. Have a good one.
Thank you. Take care.
Good night.